the WNBA's Brittney Griner is a man.
Brittney Griner files for divorce from wife.
That's not a woman. That's not a female. That's not even a trans person. That is a man.
Griner is, in fact, a man.
They ejected fans for wearing a shirt that said, "For the girls," at a women's basketball game, inside a building where political figures were being celebrated from the rafters, and messaging the league approved was running on the Jumbotron in plain sight of every paying customer in the arena. Fans who spent $1,000 per seat to watch Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham play professional basketball were confronted during overtime, told to cover their shirts or leave the premises, and escorted out of a building they had paid significant money to be inside. The shirts said, "For the girls." That was the offense. 4 words on a piece of fabric at a women's sporting event produced a security response that the league itself subsequently admitted was wrong, but only after the video spread far enough to make continued silence institutionally untenable.
Again, cultural power. This is why the WNBA this is not going to go away. This issue is not going to go away. They're in such a bad position here. Caitlin Clark, they have cultural power. People love them. People are buying tickets that would never care about the WNBA.
Caitlin Clark is an absolute all-star. She is the Michael Jordan of this. This is the girl that girls have been waiting for forever.
Caitlin Clark is a rising star in women's basketball. She's pulling in crazy viewership numbers.
Right now, this story has reached a scale the WNBA never anticipated when Sophie Cunningham answered a reporter's question and refused to walk it back. Benny Johnson has exposed the double standards on a national platform. Joe Rogan is openly discussing the eligibility questions the league refuses to answer. Millions of people who had never previously engaged with WNBA governance are now asking the same question.
A woman decided to stand up for women and female spaces. And that woman is now getting lambasted by other women because she doesn't support transgender people in female spaces. Sophie Cunningham, who many of you will probably know from this video, recently got herself in hot water because she had the audacity to say that women and girls should be protected.
What exactly does the W in WNBA stand for, and why won't the people running the league answer it directly? We are breaking down every layer of this crisis right now, from the State Farm Arena ejections through the eligibility vacuum the league created for itself, to what Caitlin Clark's continued dominance proves about what women's basketball actually is and what it deserves from the institution governing it.
There's a reason why people call Sophie Cunningham MAGA Barbie, and people are starting to fill the arenas to watch her and Caitlin Clark.
WNBA star Sophie Cunningham, who plays guard for the Indiana Fever, when an ESPN feature quoted her opposition towards biological men competing in women's sports. She said she wanted to protect young girls, both on court as well as in the locker room, calling her position kind of common sense. It has everything to do with reality.
The facts of what happened at State Farm Arena during the Indiana Fever versus Atlanta Dream game are documented through fan video, subsequent league statements, and the accounts of the people who were directly involved, and the facts are more damaging to the league's credibility than any outside critic could have manufactured independently. Fans were wearing shirts from the XXXY Athletics brand. The shirts bore the message, "For the girls," not a political slogan attached to a specific candidate or party. Not language targeting any individual player or person. 4 words expressing support for female athletic spaces, worn by paying customers at a professional women's basketball game, the precise environment where that sentiment has the most direct and obvious relevance of any context imaginable.
A women's league run by women decided a shirt wearing saying "For the girls" was too offensive. Meanwhile, State Farm Arena put up a pro-trans message on the big screen, but won't allow the shirt, the state's basic biological truth. What is so offensive or scary about this message? The genetic message of gender, the genetic message of biological sex. Wow, the WNBA doesn't know what a woman is, but the shirts that reference the XX chromosomes are banned from games.
During the overtime period of a competitive game, meaning at the moment of maximum audience attention and maximum broadcast visibility, arena security approached those fans. The instructions delivered were direct: cover the shirts or leave. One fan documenting the exchange described being in the 3rd row of the floor section, having paid approximately $1,000 per seat, having done nothing disruptive, having not made a sign or engaged in any conduct that would have provided a conventional security justification for intervention. The shirts themselves were the issue. The message on them was the problem. The fans who were approached had a choice between covering a shirt expressing a view about women's sports at a women's sporting event or surrendering the seats they had paid $1,000 each to occupy. Several of them left.
Brittney Griner's voice.
I believe what you said was effing white girl. Is it possible that's what you said?
No, would never say that.
Brittney Griner called Caitlin Clark trash and an effing white girl. Trash, effing white girl.
Brittney Griner, who I can't stand, sad that she's a Baylor grad.
Yeah,
She called her a trash expletive white girl. That was the lip reading. Yeah, it's trash white girl.
The video of those exchanges spread across social media within hours and accumulated millions of views before the night was over. By the following morning, the WNBA and the Atlanta Dream had both issued formal public statements acknowledging that the security response was wrong and should not have happened. The admission came, the question of why it happened in the first place, what policy, what instruction, what institutional orientation towards specific messages produced a security intervention against 4 words on a shirt at a women's basketball game has not received an answer with anywhere near the same clarity as the admission that it was wrong. The admission that it was wrong matters. Institutions that issue those admissions are making a statement about the outcome. The absence of a clear explanation for what produced the outcome means the conditions that generated it remain in place, available to produce the same result the next time a similar situation arises in a similar venue. The specific context surrounding the fan ejections is what converted a security overreach story into an institutional credibility crisis, because the contrast between what was permitted and what was suppressed at the same event, in the same building, on the same night, is not subtle. Stacey Abrams was welcomed and celebrated at State Farm Arena during the same game where fans wearing For the Girls shirts were being escorted toward the exits. The announcement of her presence was made from the arena's public address system. She was acknowledged as an honored guest. The characterization used, the Honorable Stacey Abrams, was broadcast to every person in the building through the same infrastructure that carries the game's official communications. A political figure with a specific and well-documented set of policy positions was given a celebratory public platform inside the arena, while paying customers expressing a view about biological sex in women's sports were told their shirts were incompatible with remaining in their seats. The Jumbotron at State Farm Arena displayed pro-trans messaging during the same event. The messaging was visible to everyone in the arena on the same screens that display game scores, player statistics, and sponsored content. It was approved content. It ran without interruption and without any security intervention directed at the people responsible for its presence in the building. The league that could not find a policy basis for permitting a shirt reading for the girls found no policy obstacle to the messaging that was running on its own broadcast infrastructure at the same time in the same venue. Benny Johnson identified this specific contrast and put it in front of his national audience with the directness that has characterized his commentary throughout this entire controversy. His framing was precise. The league is making political choices while claiming to avoid politics.
Yes, they gave us shirts. They gave us T-shirts during overtime and told us we had to leave.
And this says For the Girls.
Or cover our shirts. This just happened.
Where were you sitting?
Floor
4-3, row
C.
Yeah.
3rd row of floor 3.
And how much were your seats?
$1,000 each around.
Yeah. And we did nothing. Like we were just sitting there. I didn't make signs.
And the choices it is making consistently point in one direction, regardless of what the official posture of institutional neutrality is supposed to suggest. That argument is not a partisan construction. It is a description of documented simultaneous events at the same venue on the same night. The Jumbotron messaging was there. The Stacey Abrams welcome was there. The fan ejections were there. All 3 of those things happened in the same building during the same game, and the contrast between them requires no interpretive work to identify. The viral spread of Johnson's coverage of the incident extended the story far beyond the WNBA's existing audience. People who do not follow professional women's basketball were encountering the State Farm Arena story through Johnson's platform and forming their first impression of the league's institutional values through the lens of that specific contrast. First impressions formed through that lens are not favorable to the institution, and they are not easy to correct through subsequent communication because the correction has to overcome the image that the original contrast already established. The MAGA Barbie label that critics applied to Sophie Cunningham in the weeks following her ESPN interview was intended as a dismissive characterization designed to reduce her position to a political caricature rather than a genuine athletic and policy stance. What it actually became was something the people who deployed it did not anticipate, a cultural accelerant that expanded her audience rather than constraining it. People who had never watched a WNBA game before the Cunningham controversy began are now buying tickets specifically to see her play. Fans spent $1,000 per seat at State Farm Arena, not primarily for the competitive basketball matchup between Indiana and Atlanta, but specifically to be in the building where Sophie Cunningham was playing and to express visible solidarity with the position she had articulated at the post-game podium. That is a specific, unusual, commercially significant form of fan engagement that professional sports leagues work for years to generate around their players and almost never produce through a single interview answer. Cunningham generated it through the combination of what she said, how she said it, and the consistency with which she has maintained her position under sustained pressure. The arenas filling in response to her and Clark together represent something the league has been trying to manufacture through conventional marketing strategies for the better part of 2 decades. New fans, paying customers who were not previously part of the WNBA's audience demographic and who arrived through a door that the league's marketing department did not build. The controversy that league officials have been managing as a crisis is simultaneously driving the attendance growth the league has been trying to produce as a strategic priority. Those two things existing simultaneously in the same institutional moment is the central irony that the league's response to the Cunningham situation has consistently failed to reckon with. The movement that has built around her stands for something specific and legible: the protection of female athletic spaces and competitive integrity in women's sports. It has generated organized fan turnout, national media coverage, and the kind of sustained public engagement that defines a genuine cultural moment rather than a temporary news cycle. Every attempt to suppress it through security interventions, social pressure, or institutional messaging has produced more attention and more visible support rather than less. The MAGA Barbie label is being worn as a badge rather than a stigma by the fans who show up to games in 4-digit seats to stand behind the player who said what they believe and would not take it back. It is important to state clearly and directly what the online conversation about Brittney Griner actually is before examining what it reveals about the institution that allowed it to develop. The claims circulating across social media about Griner's gender, the photos, the beard references, the divorce filing discussions, the demands for DNA testing, are unverified internet speculation. They are not findings from any official body. They are not the conclusions of any medical, scientific, or institutional investigation. They are the product of online discourse operating in an information vacuum, where the absence of clear official standards creates the conditions for speculation to fill the space that policy should occupy. Griner has not been found by any governing body to have violated any eligibility standard. The discussion of her gender that has dominated social media represents the internet doing what the internet does when institutions decline to provide the clarity that would make that speculation unnecessary. What the Griner conversation reveals about the WNBA's institutional failure is the more important story than the speculation itself. When a league that governs women's professional athletics declines to establish clear, publicly stated biological criteria for participation eligibility, it creates a vacuum. Vacuums in public discourse do not remain empty. They fill with whatever the internet has available. And what the internet has available in the absence of official standards is speculation, rumor, and the kind of viral claim that spreads at a speed that official corrections cannot match. The photo circulating of Griner with what appears to be significant facial hair following her release from Russian detention has spread across platforms in a context the league has provided no framework for addressing.
The WNBA, of course, doesn't want to make anything political. Here they are welcoming the Honorable Stacey Abrams. The Honorable Stacey Abrams. Well, what has she done that's honorable? What's dishonorable is that at that same game, a mother wore a XXXY Athletics For the Girls with her daughter apparel. This is a brand that, of course, is defending women in women's sports. And she got kicked out of the game. And you can see there, a fan flipping them off, whether this is a board member, potentially. Look at this. Whether that's a board member of the WNBA, but she doesn't know what a woman is, right? Like, what are these women?
Not because the photo proves anything that any official body has investigated or concluded, but because the league has created no standard against which any claim can be evaluated. The absence of a chromosomal or biological testing policy means that every question about any player's eligibility exists in the same institutional vacuum where official answers are unavailable and speculation is the only thing filling the space. Griner is a legacy star of the WNBA. She has represented the league for over a decade. She endured an extraordinary ordeal during her Russian detention that commanded worldwide attention and sympathy. The fact that she is now the subject of the most prominent eligibility speculation in the league's history is not primarily a reflection of anything about her specifically. It is a reflection of what happens to players in any league when the institution governing that league refuses to establish the clear standards that would make speculation unnecessary. The league created this vacuum. The vacuum is producing these consequences, and the players most exposed to those consequences deserve a governing institution that protects them through clear policy rather than leaving them vulnerable through administrative avoidance. Benny Johnson's specific challenge to the WNBA that the league spent 6 days following the explosion of the Cunningham controversy without being able to define what the W in WNBA stands for is not rhetorical exaggeration. It describes a genuine absence in the league's governing documents that has real consequences for everyone who plays in, watches, or invests in professional women's basketball. The WNBA's eligibility criteria do not contain the kind of clear, objective biological language that would provide a definitive answer to the questions the Cunningham controversy has raised. The league has not established chromosomal testing requirements. It has not defined biological sex as the eligibility standard in terms that leave no interpretive room for the questions currently dominating its public discourse. The governing paperwork that determines who can participate in professional women's basketball does not answer the question that millions of people are currently asking about it in the most direct and unambiguous terms available. The science that commentators are invoking in this conversation is not contested in the way that the league's reluctance to engage with it might suggest. XX chromosomes define biological female. XY chromosomes define biological male. Those designations are not products of cultural construction or political preference. They are biological realities that have governed how human reproduction and physiology work throughout the history of the species. They are not changed by surgery, by hormone therapy, by legal name changes, or by any other process currently available to human beings. The W in WNBA was understood by every person who founded the league, every player who has ever competed in it, and every fan who has ever purchased a ticket to watch it, to stand for a category defined by those biological realities. The refusal to say that clearly in the league's governing documents is a choice. It is a choice made by specific people in specific institutional positions who calculated that the political cost of saying it explicitly exceeded the institutional cost of leaving it unsaid. The State Farm Arena incident, the Griner speculation, the Cunningham controversy, the fan ejections, the Jumbotron double standard, all of these are downstream consequences of that calculation. The institutional cost of leaving it unsaid has now substantially exceeded whatever political cost the explicit statement was expected to carry. The league made a choice and is now living with what that choice produced. When Joe Rogan begins openly discussing the eligibility questions surrounding a professional sports league on his podcast, something has happened that the league's communications team cannot manage through conventional press release strategy. Rogan's audience is not the WNBA's existing fan base. It is not composed primarily of people who follow women's professional basketball closely or who have been tracking the Cunningham controversy through sports-specific media channels. It is one of the largest and most demographically diverse podcast audiences in the world, reaching millions of people across political, cultural, and geographic categories that the WNBA has never successfully penetrated through its own marketing efforts. When Rogan discusses a subject, he introduces it to an audience that was not previously engaged with it, and frames it in terms that audience carries forward into its own subsequent conversations. His discussion of the WNBA's eligibility questions did not arrive from a place of detailed institutional analysis. It arrived from a place of common sense observation, the same place that Sophie Cunningham's original statement arrived from when she said she thinks it is kind of common sense that women's sports should be protected. When the most listened to podcast in the world is applying common sense framing to the question of what the WNBA's eligibility standards actually say and why the league cannot seem to answer that question directly, the story has left the sports media environment and entered the general public conversation at a scale the league has no apparatus for managing. The institutional panic that follows when a governance failure reaches an audience of that size is not theoretical. It produces exactly the kind of accelerating public scrutiny that the league is currently experiencing. More questions arriving faster than the communications team can generate responses, more platforms amplifying the foundational question before any official answer has been formulated, and more new audiences forming their first impression of the institution through the lens of its failure to answer, rather than through the lens of anything it has proactively communicated. Rogan joining Benny Johnson in the conversation created a media coalition around this specific subject that spans from political commentary to mainstream sports media to the broadest possible general audience podcast landscape. The WNBA built that coalition inadvertently by declining to answer a question that its own governing documents should have made answerable from the beginning. Every day the question remains unanswered. The coalition gets larger. In the middle of everything the league is managing, the fan ejections, the eligibility questions, the Cunningham movement, the Griner speculation, the double standards documented on the State Farm Arena Jumbotron, Caitlin Clark is playing basketball. She is playing it at a level that has driven attendance records, television ratings, and franchise valuations in ways that the league had not experienced at any point in its previous history. She is pulling in viewership numbers that embarrass certain NBA markets. She is filling arenas in cities that the WNBA had struggled to draw meaningful crowds in for years before she arrived. She is drawing fans who spent $1,000 per seat specifically to be in the building where she plays, alongside the teammate who stood up for what those fans believe, and creating the kind of live event energy that professional sports leagues spend decades and hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing trying to generate. None of that is happening because of political positioning. None of it is happening because the league's communications team executed a particularly effective campaign. It is happening because Clark is extraordinarily good at basketball, because her logo threes and her court vision and her competitive fire are genuinely extraordinary to watch.
And so why is the WNBA unable to define what a woman is? We all know what a woman is. XX chromosome. Y chromosome, you're a man. And you can't change your chromosome. You can get plastic surgery. You can lop off body parts. You can put on lipstick. You can put on wigs, but you can't change that. And so why not just define it based on gender assigned at birth? You're born with these sex organs. You're born with these chromosomes. So that's what makes you a woman. The WNBA has spent 6 days trying to figure out what the W in the WNBA stands for, and they still don't have anything.
And because fans respond to authentic athletic excellence in the way that fans have always responded to it, by showing up, by tuning in, and by bringing their money and their attention to wherever the excellence is being displayed. Her stats this season reflect a player operating at the highest level of her career, 22 points and 8.3 assists per game, leading the entire league in assists, sitting in the middle of an MVP conversation that her performance on the court justifies on purely basketball terms. She has not made herself the center of the eligibility controversy. She has not escalated the Cunningham situation or the Griner speculation or any of the political dimensions of the moment her league is navigating. She has shown up and played basketball at a level that makes all of the institutional chaos surrounding her look like background noise against the foreground of what she is doing on the floor every night. The proof that the WNBA does not need political controversy to fill arenas is standing on the court every game wearing a Fever jersey and making impossible passes to open teammates before the defense has time to register the decision. That proof is what makes the administrative failures surrounding Clark and Cunningham so frustrating to observe, because the product on the floor does not require any of the controversy the institution is generating off of it. It requires protection. It requires clear standards. It requires the kind of governance that matches the quality of what is happening during the 40 minutes the game is being played. The little girls who are showing up to games with their parents because Caitlin Clark is their role model, because she is athletic and smart and tough and plays at a level they have never seen before and makes them believe something about what they can become, those girls deserve a league that can tell them clearly what it is, what it stands for, and who it was built to protect. Clark's performance makes that question easy to answer. The league's governance has made it inexplicably complicated. The path forward from the current crisis requires concrete institutional action, rather than the reactive press release strategy that has characterized the WNBA's response to every escalating development in this controversy. The governing paperwork needs to be updated with clear, objective biological eligibility criteria that answer the question Benny Johnson posed directly and publicly. Not language that hedges or defers or creates interpretive room for the questions currently filling the vacuum. Clear, biological, publicly stated standards that define participation eligibility in terms that every player, every fan, and every broadcast partner can read and understand without a legal consultation. The science is not ambiguous. The biological definition of female is not a contested empirical question. It is a documented chromosomal reality that the league's founding purpose was built upon and that its governing documents should reflect explicitly. The fan censorship pattern documented at State Farm Arena requires more than the admission that security was wrong. It requires a public policy statement about what messages are and are not subject to security intervention at WNBA events, applied consistently across every political and cultural orientation that fans might express. A league that permits political figures to be celebrated from its arenas and runs approved messaging on its jumbotrons while ejecting fans for shirts reading "For the Girls" cannot claim institutional neutrality. It can only claim selective enforcement, and selective enforcement is precisely what is driving the institutional credibility crisis the league is currently managing. The double standard that Benny Johnson documented, political guests welcomed, fan expressions suppressed, needs to be explicitly addressed rather than managed through communications strategy designed to make it less visible. Visibility is not the problem. The practice is the problem. And the practice will keep producing documentation that spreads across platforms the league cannot control as long as it continues. Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark have built something that the league's own marketing apparatus could not have manufactured. They have brought new audiences, new money, and new cultural energy into a product that was commercially struggling before their partnership became the center of the WNBA's public identity. The institution governing that product owes them, and every athlete on every roster, the clarity, fairness, and principled governance that their talent and their courage deserve. What the WNBA is navigating right now is not a communications problem. It is a governance problem that communications cannot solve, because the absence of clear institutional standards is itself the source of every specific crisis the league is currently managing simultaneously. The State Farm Arena fan ejections are a governance problem. A league with clear, consistently applied policies about fan conduct and permitted expression does not produce a security response against "For the Girls" shirts while running approved messaging on the same building's jumbotron. The Griner speculation is a governance problem. A league with clear biological eligibility criteria does not create the vacuum that internet speculation fills when official answers are unavailable. The Cunningham controversy is a governance problem. A league that cannot answer the question of what the W in WNBA means in its own governing documents does not have the institutional foundation to manage the public conversation that question generates when a player forces it into the open on a national stage. Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham have given this league its greatest commercial moment in a generation. They have filled buildings that were struggling to find audiences. They have drawn national media coverage that the league had been trying to generate for 2 decades. They have created the cultural moment that the sport needed to make its case for serious broadcast investment and long-term commercial viability. They have done all of that while navigating a governing institution that cannot define what it governs, cannot protect its own fans from security overreach, and cannot answer the most fundamental question about its own purpose without issuing vague statements calculated to avoid the political cost of clarity. The fans who spent $1,000 to sit in the third row at State Farm Arena and got escorted out for wearing For the Girls deserve better from the institution they paid to support. The athletes competing under eligibility standards that have not been clearly defined in public governing documents deserve better. The little girls in the stands watching Caitlin Clark make logo threes and dreaming about what they can become deserve a league that can tell them, without hedging, that it was built for them and will be protected for them. The W has always stood for women. The league needs to say so clearly, put it in its governing documents explicitly, enforce it consistently, and stop creating the institutional vacuums that turn every unanswered question into a national crisis. Tell us in the comments, should the WNBA immediately implement clear biological testing standards? And does the league's governance failure at State Farm Arena change how you see its ability to manage what is coming next?